You're here now, and it's time to let it all go. The day is behind you. The worries, the noise, the clocks, let them fall gently away. You don't need to think about tomorrow. You don't need to solve or fix or chase anything. Just be right here. Sink into softness. Let your shoulders drop, your breath slow, and your eyelids grow heavy. If you feel the pull of sleep beginning to settle in, that's perfectly fine. Let it come. Now, take a deep, easy breath in and let it go. Slowly, like the fog that drifts in off the sea. Good. Our story tonight begins with that fog, a velvet mist, curling in from the Baltic coast, soft, cool and silver, wrapping itself around the ancient city of Lübeck like a quiet lullaby. It is the 14th century, and the city is almost ready to sleep. Wooden shutters are being drawn closed, lanterns are being lit in windows, and the last carts are rolling slowly home along cobbled streets. But above it all, high on the old city wall, walks a single quiet figure. Her name is Alina. She is the Lantern Girl, a girl no older than 15 winters, wrapped in a thick woolen cloak the colour of ash and dusk, and beneath her arm she carries a bundle of flint and tinder, a little oil flask, and a curved iron hook for raising the lamps. Each evening, just as the sun begins to slip away, Alina climbs the winding steps up to the city's edge. She knows each stair by heart. The cool curve of the stones, the spot where moss grows thickest, the small creak of the 7th step from the top. And when she reaches the top, the world is suddenly open again. To her left, the rooftops of Lübeck, orange tile and timber beams, gather like folded paper in twilight. To her right, the Baltic Sea whispers against the harbour wall just out of sight, and ahead of her, the ancient lanterns. Tall iron posts stand at intervals along the wall. Some lean a little, some are straight and proud. Each holds a lantern, glass-paned, brass-framed, and just waiting for the soft bloom of light. Alina begins her work at the far end, by the east tower. She always starts there. One by one she tends the lamps, she opens each little door, adds just a drop of oil, strikes her flint once, twice, until the spark catches the wick and glows to life. It is quiet work, patient work, and Alina loves it. There's something sacred about this hour, this time when the city gives its last sigh before sleep. There's no rush, no chatter, only the soft rasp of wool against stone as she walks, and the echo of her boots on the old walkway. The people below see only the warm glow appearing above them, a line of golden dots, like stars on the edge of the sky. But Alina sees it all. She sees the way each flame dances a little differently, how some flicker with a sideways lean in the wind, how others burn slow and steady like a heartbeat. She pauses at each one, just for a moment, to make sure it is just right. This was a real job, you know, long ago, in towns and cities across medieval Europe. Lantern lighters were paid to walk the walls and streets each evening, to keep the lamps filled, the fires burning, and the paths safe and glowing. Some were old men, some were boys with long poles, but in Lübeck it is Alina. And as she lights the next lamp, she hums a little rhyme, soft, low and sweet. Not a song, not really, just a verse passed down from her grandmother. The flame is small, but it will grow. The night is long, but it will go. Light the way, and let them see how soft the dark was meant to be. The words drift into the mist. No one hears them, except the lanterns, and maybe the sea. By the time she reaches the south tower, the sky is the colour of old lavender, and the stars have begun to wake. She rests here for a moment. There is a bench tucked beneath the tower arch, worn smooth by years of guards and pigeons, and sometimes Alina herself. She sits down, takes a sip from the clay flask tied to her belt. It tastes like river water and mint, cool, clean, and for a few long breaths she simply listens. The fog makes everything quieter, but not silent. There is the faint rustle of leaves below, the creak of a sign swinging over the baker's door, and far off from the fishing quay, the low hum of someone singing to the sea. Alina smiles to herself. There's one more row of lanterns to light, but there is time. Always time in the fog. Time. The wind changes as Alina rises once more. It's softer now, less of a sea breeze, and more of a whisper. A hush that carries with it the scent of salt, old rope, and distant pine smoke. She tightens her cloak, not because she's cold, but because it feels like the night has gently exhaled and she is wrapped inside it. As she walks to the next lantern, she passes a carved stone lion, its surface smoothed by centuries of weather and time. Alina runs her hand along its back for luck. She always does. The next lantern is tucked in a little alcove where ivy creeps up the stone wall. It's the trickiest one. She kneels slowly, feels the dampness of the stone beneath her boots, and lights it, one careful breath at a time. A soft click of the flint, a flicker, and then a bloom of gold. The flame reflects in her eyes. Some say that lanterns steal a little piece of the sunset, that the glow you see in the streets is just a memory of the sun trapped in glass. Alina doesn't know if that's true, but she likes the idea. She finishes the last 3 lanterns in a slow rhythm, like notes in a lullaby. Step, strike, light, pause, watch, and then, finally, she turns around to take in what she's made. The entire wall is lit now, a ribbon of warm light stretching above the sleeping city, each one still flickering gently, each one whispering, "You're safe now. It's time to rest." She smiles. She doesn't need anyone to see her work. She doesn't need applause or cause or praise. The light is enough. The stillness is enough. And then, from far, far off, the bell tower chimes. Just one soft note, low and round. It echoes gently between the walls, bouncing through alleyways and over rooftops. Alina closes her eyes for a moment and hums a reply. It is not part of her job, but she does it anyway. You see, in some medieval towns, the lantern lighters would call out the hour in rhyme, gentle chants in the dark, little poems carried on the wind to those still awake. Alina knows many of them. Some are silly, some are old, but tonight she says this one. 10 bells ring in fog and smoke, 1 flame for each dream you spoke. Sleep now, hearts behind each door. The lanterns keep you evermore. She speaks it softly, so softly, and if someone hears it, maybe an old woman by her window or a baker cleaning his stones, they will smile and sleep just a little easier. Alina leans on the stone ledge, letting the wind brush past her cheeks. Below, the houses huddle together in quiet comfort. Their little chimney trails curl upward, and the sound of life has faded to a murmur. A cat darts across a roof. An owl calls once, then is silent. It is nearly full dark now, but not frightening. No, tonight's dark feels soft, kind, like a quilt spread over the shoulders of the world. Alina begins the slow walk back. She takes her time. The city will still be sleeping when she returns. She thinks of the soup waiting at home, likely warm, with carrots and thick barley. She thinks of her grandmother sitting in the rocker by the hearth knitting something new, or maybe dozing with her chin on her chest. She thinks of her own bed tucked by the window with a wool blanket and the scent of lavender tucked in the corners. And still, she walks slowly, because the wall is her friend. The lanterns are her stars, and the fog is her lullaby. As she descends the winding steps, her boots make no sound, just the faint shift of wool and the quiet rhythm of breath. She reaches the bottom just as the last bell tolls. 11, 1 more hour before midnight. But her work is done. She opens the small wooden gate at the base of the wall and steps out into the alley. It's narrow and cobbled, with ivy creeping down and a puddle catching the lamplight like a polished stone. She looks back once, up to the wall, up to the glow of the lanterns she lit, now shining quietly in the dark, and then she turns and disappears into the mist. The lanterns remain. They burn for lovers still awake, and widows saying one last prayer, and children dreaming of sea voyages and sugar figs. They burn through the fog and the frost and the midnight air, and above them all, the sky keeps watch. Clouds roll by like drifting ships, and stars blink open one by one, until the heavens themselves begin to whisper, "Sleep now? You are safe. The Lantern Girl has passed this way, and her light still lingers, and her light..." Later that night, as most of the city lies curled beneath quilts and roof beams, a gentle hush settles even deeper over Lübeck. and in a small timbered home tucked just beyond St. Mary's bell tower, Alina opens a crooked wooden door and steps quietly inside. Her home is humble, but filled with warmth. A fire glows softly in the hearth. Its crackling is faint, like tiny sighs, and the scent of burning pine and peat curls in the air. Her grandmother stirs slightly in her chair, a basket of mending balanced on her lap, half finished, half forgotten. A cat lifts its head from the hearth rug, blinks slowly, and decides nothing important has changed. Alina tiptoes across the creaking floorboards and hangs her cloak by the door. It's still damp at the hem, where the fog kissed it. She unties her little pouch and sets the flint and hook beside the stone sink. Then she warms her hands by the fire. There is no need to speak. Her grandmother smiles, soft and slow, and simply nods. That is all. Alina sits cross-legged by the fire with a bowl of soup, thick with lentils and leeks, steam curling into her cheeks. She eats slowly, savouring, each spoonful a tiny anchor, pulling her gently back to the quiet of home. Outside, the wind picks up just slightly. The windows rattle gently in their wooden frames, but the lanterns above keep burning. You see they were designed to hold their flame through wind and rain. Brass-framed, lead-soldered, each one crafted by the city's own glaziers and smiths. They were made with care, meant to endure, like the people who walk these streets, and like the girl who lights them. After supper, Alina climbs the narrow stairs to the loft, bare feet on cool wood, each step an exhale. Her bed is pushed beneath a slanted beam, with a thick woolen blanket that smells faintly of soaproot and old summer sun. On the sill there's a tiny jar of lavender from last year's harvest, and beside it a scrap of parchment, folded like a letter. Alina sets her candle down and breathes in the air by the window. It smells of mist, of stone, of the city settling into itself. She listens for a long moment, not for anything loud, but for the gentle evidence of sleep, the rhythmic creak of a sign swaying on chains, the distant bark of a dog already echoing into dreams, and from far above, the faintest flutter of a nightbird's wings. Then she lies down, pulls the covers up to her chin, and lets herself drift, because she knows, now, tonight, the city is safe. Her lights are lit, and the dark is no longer empty. It is filled with warmth, and quiet, and care. Somewhere out there, beyond the fog and rooftops, a fisherman turns in his sleep, his dreams lit by a lantern light on the waves. A child stirs in her blanket and imagines a line of glowing stars marching above the wall, guarding the town like celestial watchmen. And in the baker's loft, a young apprentice dozes near the embers, the scent of rising dough and lamp oil tangled in his hair. Each of them, unknowing, unafraid, cradled in the light that Alina left behind. And as she sinks into slumber, her mind drifts not into grand tales or wild adventures, but to soft things, the sound of flint striking stone, the way a flame curls upward like a fern unfurling, the hush of fog brushing stone. She dreams of the lanterns, still glowing, still standing, even as the night deepens around them. And so the hours pass. Midnight arrives, not with fanfare, but like a soft footfall on snow. The city does not stir. It only exhales. The stars above blink slowly, mirrored by the lanterns below. Even the sea is quiet. Its waves breathe against the shore in long, gentle rhythms, as if it, too, is sleeping beneath the weight of the fog. Time folds in on itself, moments slipping one into the next, like parchment curling gently at the corners, until at last, the very first whisper of dawn brushes the edge of the sky. A shade lighter, just a sigh, and in the loft above the fire, Alina stirs beneath her blanket. Not fully awake, just shifting, as if her dreams are turning over like waves in their tide. She won't rise yet. There is still time, but the night is ending, and soon another day will begin, another evening, another walk along the wall, another ribbon of light stretched above the rooftops, because the dark will always come, and Alina will always be there, to meet it with a flame. Time, in Lübeck, does not hurry. It drifts, like mist along the riverbanks, sliding through the narrow alleyways, climbing gently up the stone walls, and pausing only when it reaches the flame. Alina's life follows this rhythm. Each day begins with soft light, filtering through the beams of her loft, settling onto the woolen blanket with the same hush as snowfall. She wakes slowly, not to bells or commands, but to the scent of bread baking below, to her grandmother's gentle humming as she kneads dough by the hearth. There is no rush, no urgency, only warmth. By midday, Alina helps gather firewood, sweeps the stones at the back of the house, and sometimes reads aloud from her father's old books, parchments faded and worn filled with looping letters and tiny sketches of herbs. But always, as the shadows grow longer, her gaze turns to the sky, because she knows the time is coming. The hour when the sun dips below the Baltic clouds, when the rooftops glow amber and the mist rises from the sea like steam from a silver kettle. It is her time, lantern time. So she wraps herself in her cloak, ties her pouch to her belt, and climbs once again to the wall. But no two nights are the same. Some evenings the fog is thick, curling like wool between the buildings, muffling every sound but her own slow steps. Other nights the air is clear and crisp, and stars stretch across the sky like stitched embroidery. She notices these things, she remembers them, because to Alina, lighting the lamps is not simply a task. It is a ritual, a rhythm, a reverence. Each lantern is part of a song only she can hear, and she keeps the beat with every step. Once, as she was lighting the second-to-last lamp near the south watchtower, she paused, because something in the air had shifted. A sound, faint, like distant hooves on packed earth. She stood still, quill still, listening. It was a horse, slow, heavy, steady. A traveller entering the city late, arriving through the north gate under the cover of fog. She heard the soft jangle of the bridle, the creak of leather, the horse's breath as it huffed through the cold. And the traveller, whoever he was, looked up and saw a warm light on the wall above, a flame glowing behind thick glass, a golden star to guide him home. He never knew Alina was there, but still, her light found him. That's the secret of the lanterns, you see. They don't announce themselves, they don't ask to be thanked. They simply appear, soft as a breath, steady as a pulse, keeping watch when no one else does. Alina walked home that night feeling something quiet and proud settle in her chest. Not pride in herself, but pride in the flame. It had done its work, without words, without waiting, just like always. Back home, her grandmother had left a bowl of warm milk by the fire, a curl of cinnamon resting on top like a feather. Alina wrapped herself in a shawl and sipped slowly, watching the embers shift in their bed of ash. And the next morning, as the fog began to lift and the scent of the sea gave way to baking bread, she passed a merchant at the corner stall. He was unloading bolts of dyed wool, grumbling softly about a late-night delivery. Would have missed the turn if not for that wall light, he muttered to himself, not realizing she heard. And Alina just smiled, soft, secret and silent, because some lights shine without ever asking for praise. In the weeks that followed, the lanterns weathered rain and wind and frost. Alina oiled them, cleaned their glass, checked the wicks. She carried out her work each night with a patience rarely seen in those her age. And sometimes, when she had lit the very last flame, she would linger at the wall's edge. Hands wrapped around the iron railing, eyes turned toward the stars. She would speak aloud to the night, her voice no louder than the wing beat of a moth. Not prayers, exactly, not wishes, just words, quiet ones. That one's for the baker's daughter, who wakes early for flour. And that one for the sailor, who dreams of the tide. And this one for anyone afraid of the dark tonight. And then she'd walk home, a little slower each time. Not because she was tired, but because she loved the dark a little more each night. The first snow of winter came softly. No fanfare, no bluster, just a quiet settling. Flakes drifting down like scattered feathers, each one landing gently on the rooftops, the windowsills and the old stones of the city wall. Alina noticed it even before she stepped outside. The air had that special stillness, a softness that made every sound feel padded, every breath a little more silent. She pulled on her thicker cloak, the one lined with old lamb's wool, and wrapped a knitted scarf twice around her neck. Her grandmother had placed a warm pebble in the pocket, a little charm to keep her hands from aching in the cold. Outside, the world had changed. The lantern posts wore tiny white crowns. The walkway crunched beneath her boots, and the flames she lit glowed even more golden against the fresh white hush. There is something about snow especially the first snow, that makes the world feel reborn. Alina worked more slowly that evening, not because the cold made her fingers stiff, but because it felt important to move gently, to walk without disturbing too much, as if she was adding light to something sacred. The snow didn't stop the city. Below, shopkeepers swept stoops, children gathered slush into lopsided snow creatures, and someone, somewhere, was playing a soft tune on a flute, its notes curling up into the lantern light like ribbons. But up on the wall, Alina moved through a quieter world. Every footstep was a hush, every breath visible, like silk. Every lamp she lit felt like a prayer offered to the sky. After she finished the final lantern, she stayed at the south tower longer than usual. The snow continued falling, but not heavily, just enough to blur the edges of things, to make the rooftops look like icing, and the distant sea like pale milk poured into velvet. She leaned on the cold stone rail, watching the flakes catch in her hair, melt on her lashes. She didn't mind. Snow, she always thought, was the sky's version of silence, and silence can be a kind of music. She remembered something her grandmother had told her, a piece of old town lore. That lantern, flames burn differently in snow, not brighter, not dimmer, just softer, as if the snow listens to the light. And that night, Alina believed it. The flames weren't just flames, they were small suns, sleeping stars, tiny stories of warmth and endurance, floating quietly in their glass jars while the world slept all around them. Back home, Alina's cheeks glowed pink from the cold. She pressed her palms close to the hearth, letting the heat soak into her skin. Her grandmother had prepared a special brew, warm milk steeped with cinnamon bark and honeyed oat. Alina drank slowly, each sip anchoring her deeper into comfort. And above her, through the loft's small window, she could still see one of the lanterns glowing at the edge of the city wall, just one, barely a flicker, but enough to know it was still there, still burning, still watching. She fell asleep to the crackle of wood, the weight of blankets, and the faint sparkle of snow catching moonlight, and as her eyes closed, her mind slipped once again toward the flame. The following days brought more snow, then frost, then a hush that settled over the whole town like a woolen cloak. But still, each evening Alina climbed the wall. She wore thicker boots, added fur to her gloves, kept the oil warm in a small pouch close to her chest. The cold made her work slower, but never less gentle. In fact, something about the stillness of winter seemed to fit her rhythm even more. The lanterns became more than just beacons. They became companions, golden, quiet and faithful. And at night she imagined that the snow carried the light to the dreams of everyone sleeping beneath it, like messages, glowing letters on a soft white scroll. One evening, near the year's turning, Alina passed an old man standing at the base of the wall. He looked up and waved his mittened hand, his beard dusted with frost. "Thank you," he called softly, his voice catching on the chill, "for the stars you hang each night." She smiled, touched the brim of her hood in return, and walked on, but her chest felt warmer, because now she knew someone saw, not just the light, but her. And still, that wasn't why she did it. She would have lit the lanterns whether the world watched or not, because some things deserve to shine. Sometimes. As Alina walked the quiet stone path atop the city wall, she would remember, not just the footsteps or the way the sea wind curled behind her ears, but something deeper, a feeling from when she was even smaller. A time before she was old enough to carry the oil flask herself, before she knew the rhythm of the lanterns. She remembered the first time she saw the lights from below. She had been only 7 years old, walking hand in hand with her father on a winter night. The fog had been thick, so thick in fact that the town looked like it was floating in clouds, and above them the line of golden lanterns glowed through the mist like fairy lights sewn into the sky. She remembered tilting her head back and whispering, "Who lit all those stars, Papa?" And her father had smiled, his beard dusted with frost. "Not stars," he said. "Those are lanterns, lit by the hands of the quiet ones, the ones who carry the flame when no one's looking." Alina never forgot that moment. Even now, as the one who lights them herself, she sometimes paused and looked up from below, just to see what she once saw, and every time it still felt like magic. Her father had passed the following spring. A fever, swift and silent. She did not understand it then, not fully, only that the house felt quieter afterward, that the fire didn't seem to crackle quite the same, and that the light in her mother's eyes flickered, just like a lantern running out of oil. But that night, even through her tears, Alina looked up at the wall, and the lanterns were still there, still glowing, still keeping watch. That was the first time she'd ever felt it. That quiet comfort, that soft reassurance that even when things change, even when hearts feel heavy and rooms grow cold, the light remains. And so when she was old enough, barely 12, she offered to take over the task. Some thought her too young, too quiet, too small, but she proved them wrong with every evening's flame. By now she knew the lanterns better than most people in town. Each post had its own little personality. The crooked one near the baker's chimney leaned just a little further each year, but still held its flame strong through wind and sleet. The new one by the carpenter's square always flickered too fast, as if it had a secret to tell. And her favourite, near the west-facing parapet, was just slightly lower than the others, which meant she could see her own reflection in the glass as she lit it. Some evenings, she'd look into that reflection and see not just herself, but every version of her that had ever walked this wall. The little girl holding her father's hand, the 12-year-old lighting her first flame, the quiet, steady soul she'd grown into, all woven together like warm thread through linen, all part of the same story. Winter began to give way. The snow melted into little rivers between the stones. The air held a hint of damp earth and chimney soot, a sign that spring was near, and the lanterns glowed differently now, still warm, still golden, but somehow lighter, like they were preparing for the season to shift. And Alina, as always, walked the wall with quiet care. Only now, something new began to happen. More people began to notice. The old stonemason at the corner shop began leaving a little package of dried apples on the bench beneath the tower. The baker's wife smiled more often when Alina passed by, and one evening a child no more than 5 ran out into the square just as Alina finished her last lantern. She pointed up and whispered, "Look, Mama, the light's come back again." And her mother had simply nodded, wrapping the girl in her shawl and replying, "It always does." That night, Alina walked home with her heart full and quiet. Not proud, not boastful, just still. Because she understood something she hadn't before. The lanterns weren't just for safety, or for tradition, or for rhyme. They were part of the rhythm that held the town together. A soft promise, lit anew each night. As spring deepened, the rhythm of Lübeck softened even more. The cobbled streets slowly shed their frost. Rain arrived in quiet taps on rooftops and puddled like glass between stones. And through it all, the lanterns remained. One evening, as the town prepared for the feast of St. Florian, patron of firekeepers and candlemakers, Alina was asked to light a special flame. Not on the wall, not in a lantern, but in the old square at the centre of town. There, beneath the carved stone fountain, a ceremonial lamp had been placed. A brass bowl, wide and open, filled with oil and circled with flowers. It was tradition that the flame used in the centre lamp must come from one of the city's watch lights, a lantern already glowing above the wall. Alina had never been chosen before. The priest gave her a nod, and the people of Lübeck watched as she climbed the parapet, cupped her hands around the flame, and walked it gently down into the waiting square. There was no applause, no great noise, just a soft hush, a moment of stillness, and then the new flame flickered to life. It caught, it danced, and the people exhaled as one, as if a promise had been made, a reassurance returned. The light was passed from lantern to heart. That night, after the feast had ended, after the bells had quieted and the laughter faded into sleep, Alina returned to the wall. She stood beneath her favourite lantern, the one with the slightly crooked frame, the one that held her reflection just so, and looked up. The flame still burned, not just here, but inside her too. A warmth that wasn't loud, but strong. She thought of how long ago others must have walked these same stones. Lantern lighters with stiff joints and tired eyes. Young boys with satchels and poles, maybe even girls like her. Quiet, watchful, woven into the background of history. She liked that thought, that she was part of something older than herself, a line of flame carried forward, hand to hand, through wind, through snow, through time. There's something curious about quiet jobs, the ones no one claps for, the ones done when others are dreaming. They hold the world together, they light the path, not for glory, but for grace. Alina knew this, felt it deep in her bones. And so she walked the wall, not for praise, but for peace. Because with each flame she lit, she helped someone sleep better, feel safer, believe, if only for a moment, that the world was still held in gentle hands. As the months slipped by, the lanterns became part of her breath. Their rhythm matched her own. And sometimes, on especially still nights, she imagined what the city would sound like if she could hear every dream at once. The sailor dreaming of gulls, the widow dreaming of her younger days, the child dreaming of stars made of sugar, all of them wrapped beneath her flame, all of them held in quiet light. She whispered a rhyme to herself, an old one from her mother's side of the family. A lantern lit is never lost. It shines in dark and dew and frost, and even when the wicks grow low, the hands that lit it still will glow. She spoke it like a lullaby, a spell, a comfort. Then she walked on, the mist gathering around her ankles like a patient cat. Sometimes she wondered if the lanterns knew her, not just as the girl who lit them, but as Alina. She liked to believe they did, that they noticed the days she walked slower, the evenings she hummed softly under her breath, the nights her fingers trembled just a little from the cold, and in return they burned just a bit steadier for her. It was a friendship not built on words, but on warmth, on trust, on the quiet promise that light, no matter how small, was enough to hold the dark at bay, to hold. The lanterns began to change with the season, not their shape or their flame, but their light. In spring the glow softened, no longer burning against the stark white of snow, but casting warm reflections on the dew-wet leaves, dancing across the stone as blossoms opened quietly overnight. The city itself felt lighter, windows opened earlier, breezes carried the scent of lilac and bread, and the people of Lübeck smiled more. Alina noticed. She always did. She passed the same doorways each night, some newly painted, some covered in ivy, some so old they seemed part of the stone itself, and sometimes, just as she walked by, a candle in the window would flicker into life, as if the people inside were lighting their own flame in answer to hers. No one said a word, no one called out, but Alina knew. They were part of the same quiet ritual now, a town held gently by its own hands, one lantern at a time. One evening, near the gate of the tanner's quarter, she came upon something new, a tiny clay figure, set carefully beneath the base of the lantern post. It was no taller than her thumb, shaped like a girl in a hooded cloak, with a tiny flame etched on her chest. Someone had made it, just for her. No name, no signature, just a soft offering of gratitude left in the shadow of the light. Alina knelt, ran her finger gently over its back, and smiled. She did not take it. She left it there so the lantern could watch over it, a guardian for the guardian. And that night, as she lit the final flame, the city below felt closer. Not smaller, not louder, just closer. As if every window, every rooftop, every heartbeat under every blanket had leaned a little toward her light. Her grandmother began saving wax stubs in a wooden box. "We'll melt them," she said, "and press them new." Alina helped, of course. They boiled water in an iron pot, melted the wax with slow, careful movements, and poured it into small wooden moulds carved long ago, one candle at a time, and with each one they whispered small blessings, old words passed down through the women of her family. For warmth, for patience, for safe return. It wasn't magic. Not truly, but it felt like something more than ordinary. And Alina took to carrying one of those candles with her, tucked in cloth beside her oil pouch, just in case a lantern ever went completely dark. It never did, but the candle stayed with her all the same. By mid-spring the wall was lined with new ivy. Little green tendrils crept across the stones, curling around the lantern poles as if nature itself wanted to help hold the light. Birds nested in the crevices. One even sang to her as she lit the westernmost flame. She hummed back, soft and slow. It was a tune her mother used to sing at bedtime, a lullaby about the moon following travellers home. And as she walked beneath the growing stars, Alina thought again about her place in this pattern. She did not need crowds, or names on scrolls, or coins in her hand. Just this, just her light, the sky, and the gentle hush of a town learning to rest. She thought too about the people she would never meet, the travellers passing through, the sailors docking late, the messengers riding in at dusk. They would see the glow of the wall, not knowing the girl who tended it, not hearing her soft songs or seeing her feet step lightly on stone. But still, they'd feel it. The comfort, the care, and maybe, just maybe, they'd rest easier because of it. Alina didn't need thanks. The light itself was enough. The flamen was its own reward. As the days stretched longer, the sun began to linger, its golden rays casting long shadows across Lübeck's rooftops. Evening arrived more slowly now, and still, Alina waked. She knew the moment, that hush between sunset and true night. When the rooftops exhaled warmth, and the town sighed itself towards sleep, it was her hour. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, threaded her fingers through the oil pouch, and stepped once more into the gentle dusk. The lanterns waited for her, like old friends holding their breath, and she greeted them one by one. Each time her flint struck and each tiny spark was a beginning, a promise. Sometimes she paused to listen, not for footsteps, not for voices, but for the rhythm beneath the silence, the soft creak of ivy climbing stone, the hush of cloth against cobble, the tiny click as a lantern door closed gently behind its flame. These were her lullabies, and as the city fell into shadow, the lights bloomed along the wall, not sudden, not showy, just soft golden petals, opening one after another in the growing dark. She'd come to know which parts of the town fell asleep first. The cooper's yard, silent just after supper. The spice seller's corner, quiet by moonrise, save for the tinkling of wind chimes. And the fishmonger's stall, always lingering a little longer, its shutters closing with a sigh just before her final lantern. The lanterns filled those silences, not with noise, but with presence, a warm acknowledgement, a reminder that even as dreams began to swirl behind wooden shutters, something gentle stood watch. One evening, as she lit the lantern near the bell tower's edge, she heard footsteps, not hurried, not loud, but soft, like someone unsure of being seen. She turned. A boy stood a few paces back, no older than 10. Thin scarf, patched sleeves, barely old enough to be out past twilight. He looked at her with wide eyes. "You like them all?" he asked. Alina nodded. The boy shuffled closer, his gaze fixed on the flame she'd just set dancing. "My sister says they're stars that fell down to the wall," he whispered. Alina smiled, kneeling to his level. "And do you believe her?" she asked gently. He thought for a moment, then shrugged. "Sometimes." She reached into her pouch and pulled out the little wax candle her grandmother had made. She pressed it into the boy's palm. "For you," she said. "So you always have one, just in case you need to find your way." His fingers curled around it, tightly, like it was treasure. Then, without another word, he ran off into the fog. Alina watched him go, watched until the mist swallowed him completely, and still she sayed, because that too was the work of the lanterns. Not just to light the way, but to show someone they mattered, even just for a moment. Later that night, back in her loft beneath the low beams, Alina lay awake for a while. The window was open. The night air was cool against her cheeks. She could see the line of lanterns stretching across the wall, tiny flames in the distance, unmoving, faithful, and she thought of the boy, and his sister, and all the others she'd never know. Each of them, wandering through their dreams beneath her light. She breathed slowly, softly, one breath for each lantern, one breath for each star on the wall. She drifted off with a smile, her hand still warm from the candle she'd given away. And outside the lanterns glowed on, not loudly, not brightly, but gently, like the heartbeat of a city held in careful hands. Some nights, Alina dreamed she was walking the wall forever. No beginning, no end, just mist, stone, and lanterns that reached into the horizon like pearls on a string, and in the dream she never grew tired. Her cloak never grew heavy, the oil never ran out. She walked with light in her hands and peace in her chest. The city below slept on, safe still cradled in the rhythm of her steps. When she woke from dreams like these, her heart beat slowly. Not in fear, not in longing, but in deep, quiet knowing that what she did mattered, that the flame was not just for others, it was for her too. By midsummer, the lanterns burned longer. The sky stayed lavender blue until late, but still the lighting began at the same hour, not because the light was needed, but because tradition asked it, and Alina understood the value of a rhythm kept faithfully, even if no one noticed. Even if some evenings were nearly too bright to see the flames, she lit them all the same, because some promises, the quiet ones, are worth keeping, even when no one is watching. One evening, she returned home later than usual. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of wet stone and blooming clover. She passed through the back door, hung her cloak beside the hearth, and turned to find her grandmother smiling softly. "Come," her grandmother whispered. "I've something for you." On the table sat a wooden box, old but freshly oiled, its corners carved with swirling vines, its latch shaped like a tiny flame. Alina opened it slowly. Inside, a lantern, small, handmade, its frame a mix of iron and brass, its glass tinted the faintest amber. "It was your grandfather's," her grandmother said. "He used it when he was a nightlighter, before the war, before the frost years." Alina touched the cool metal, ran her finger along the hinge. "It's yours now," her grandmother whispered. Alina said nothing. She didn't need to. The flame inside her chest glowed brighter. That night, instead of her usual lantern stick and pole, she carried the box. And when she reached the midpoint of the wall Daumbo, where the wind was always strongest and the world below the parapet looked like a sea of rooftops, she opened it. Inside, she placed one of her grandmother's wax candles. She struck her flint, and the lantern bloomed. Its amber light shimmered through the mist like a memory made warm again. She hung it from the center hook, a place reserved for special occasions, though none had ever been named. Tonight was special enough. As she stood before it, the wind tugged gently at her sleeves. The flame inside the old lantern held steady. Alina closed her eyes, and she felt them. Not ghosts, not visions, but the presence of those who had walked before her, the keepers of the light. She imagined them, shadows with satchels and kind hands, whispering softly as they worked. They didn't speak in words, but she understood all the same. "You're one of us, you always were." That night, when she returned home, the world felt slightly different. Not larger, not smaller, just more connected, as if time had folded a little, and she now stood in the middle of something greater. Not just the wall, not just the town, but a quiet lineage stitched together by firelight, one lantern to the next. The next few nights passed quietly, like low tides beneath a full moon. Alina's routine stayed the same, but something inside her had shifted. Each flame she lit now held layers. Not just fire, not just heat, but echoes. She began to whisper to them. Not loudly, never loudly, just a few soft words with each lantern. "Rest well. Keep watch. Shine on." Tiny blessings breathed into the flame. She didn't know if the lanterns could listen, but they seemed to glow just a little warmer when she did. Down below, the streets of Lübeck eased into summer. Fishermen rose earlier. Windows stayed open longer, and the fog rolled in not as mist, but as thin, silvery veils of evening breeze. Alina adjusted to the shift. Her cloak grew lighter, her boots less burdened by the cold, but still the work remained sacred. Even in warmth, even in ease. The lanterns were needed, not for light always, but for comfort. People had come to look for them, to mark time by them, to fall asleep with the knowledge that a glow still burned somewhere above the rooftops. One evening, she found a folded piece of parchment tucked into the curve of a lantern post. At first, she thought it might be refuse, but as she unfolded it carefully, she saw careful script. Not hurried, not bold, just thoughtful. "To the one who lights the path, I do not know your name, but each night I wait for the moment the lantern outside my home catches fire. It tells me I made it through another day. It helps me sleep. Thank you." There was no signature, no address, just that. Alina read it 3 times, then folded it again and tucked it into her pouch like a treasure. Because in that letter she felt it again, the truth she had long believed but now saw written plainly. Her work mattered, not loudly, not in bells or proclamations, but in quiet ways, in unseen hearts. in the pause between exhaustion and sleep. The next few nights she passed that same lantern post a little slower. She didn't know who had written the note, didn't want to guess, but she began to light that flame with a tiny bow of her head, a nod from one soul to another. She began noticing more of these secret thank yous, a posy of pressed lavender tied with string, left beneath a lantern near the baker's alley. A ribbon stitched with stars looped around the post at the mill gate. A small stone, smooth and cool, carved with the spiral and tucked at the foot of the south tower. None of them said anything aloud, but each was a whisper of gratitude, a silent lantern of its own. And with each one, Alina felt less alone, more seen, more held, even as she remained the quiet one, the one walking above, the one who never knocked on doors but still found her way into people's nights. She began to leave her own messages too, nothing grand, just chalk marks in corners, little symbols from her grandmother's embroidery, stars, moons, little curls of wind. If someone noticed, they didn't say. But perhaps one evening, as someone looked up, they'd find a tiny spiral near the base of a post and smile without knowing why. These were her way of answering, not with her name, but with warmth, with a trace of light left behind in silence. The days grew golden, not just with sunlight, but with something slower, softer, like the earth itself had exhaled. The city thrummed with late summer stillness. In the morning, merchants called out sweet things, berries, honey loaves, folded herbs in paper. In the afternoon, shutters closed gently against the heat, and by evening everything waited for the lanterns. Even the breeze seemed to hold still just before Alina arrived, as though the very stones knew her footsteps by heart. This time of year the light came more slowly. The sun lingered at the edge of the Baltic Sea, kissing the waves for hours before it dipped, and so the lanterns glowed not in defiance of dark, but as accompaniment. They walked beside the dusk, not racing it, not fighting it, but ushering it in, like a lullaby sung in harmony with fading day. Alina noticed how the light caught different. Now, in puddles from a brief summer shower, in the curved iron rails, in the glossy beetle-wing sheen of ivy on stone. Everything shimmered, even the flames. She passed a group of young children one evening, gathered in a circle at the fountain. They were playing a quiet clapping game, repeating a rhyme she hadn't heard in years. Lantern burn and lantern stay, show the dreams that hide away. If I sleep and hold it tight, may I walk with stars tonight. She stopped a moment, hidden just out of view. The children didn't see her, but their voices, soft and sweet, carried up into the lantern light. And Alina smiled, because she remembered. She had sung that rhyme too, long ago, before she even knew what lanterns really were. Before the wall, before the oil, just a little girl singing stars into her pillow. And now she was the one keeping the stars lit. That night, she paused at the central tower, the one with the old brass bell and the crooked vane. She sat for a while, something she didn't often do. Her feet dangled over the low ledge. The breeze wrapped gently around her knees. The sounds of the town curled upward. Soft water from the canal, a dog's sleepy bark, a far-off lullaby plucked on a lute. She leaned back against the stone and let the night hold her, not just as its keeper, but as someone who belonged to it too, because even lantern lighters need moments to simply be, to feel the hush they help create, to rest in the rhythm they carry. As she sat there, she noticed something new. The stars above looked just like the lanterns, scattered, gentle, flickering ever so slightly, a mirror. The sky watching the earth reflecting the sky, and between them, Alina, a girl with a flame, a girl with a promise, one she lit each night, one she carried in silence, one she would pass on someday. She wondered then who would walk this path after her. Not soon, not yet. But someday. Would they walk slowly? Would they whisper to the flames? Would they notice the ivies and the stars, the laughter in the square? She hoped so, because the lanterns weren't just things. They were moments. They were memory. And to tend them was to remember what mattered most. Gentleness, steadiness, the light we carry even when no one sees. That night, before returning home, Alina whispered one more blessing to the western flame. May you burn quiet and kind. May you keep watch. May you be seen. And in the silence that followed, the flame wavered. Just once, then steadied itself again, dead. In the soft hush of summer's end, Alina noticed the air beginning to change. Not sharply, not suddenly, but in the gentlest of ways. The breeze smelled a little more like moss. The ivy on the stone grew darker at the edges, and when she walked the wall, her footsteps echoed a little more, as if the stones had begun to listen again. Even the lantern flames seemed to lean forward, eager for the cooler nights ahead. The seasons were shifting, not away, but toward the next quiet rhythm, toward the next long breath. One evening, as she lit the northern post, a cat appeared, black as ink, with white paws like dipped candle wicks. It didn't meow, didn't startle, just followed. From lantern to lantern it padded softly behind her, never closer than a few steps, never too far behind. It blinked slowly when she looked back, and Alina, smiling softly, whispered, "You may walk with me then, but only if you mind your shadow." The cat said nothing, but it stayed, all the way to the final flame. Then, as she hung the lantern's latch closed, it gave one soft flick of its tail, and disappeared over the edge into the alley below. The next night it was there again, and the night after. A companion of sorts, silent, observant, just like her. She began to leave it tiny gifts, a corner of dried fish wrapped in linen, a folded leaf tucked beside a warm post. It never thanked her, but it always came back, and in its quiet presence she felt something unexpected, companionship. The people of Lübeck began to speak of her more, though never too loudly. Children left small drawings near the lanterns, stick-figure girls with glowing halos, cats curled beside flames, walls that stretched into the stars. Elders began setting candles in their windows to welcome the flame back home. Some even swore that when the fog grew thick you could see her glow from the harbour, a line of warm light through the mist, guiding ships back to shore. She didn't seek these stories, didn't claim them, but they found her, because when a light is steady, people notice, even if only in whispers. She added a new ritual to her evenings. After the final flame, she would walk once more to the central lantern, the one that stood just above the chapel roof, and she would pause there just long enough to take 3 deep breaths. One for the day that had ended, one for the flame she'd carried, and one for tomorrow, waiting quietly just beyond the horizon. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes in those moments, she could feel the heartbeat of the city, not loud, not pounding, but a soft, steady thrum, beneath stone, beneath soil, beneath sky, as if Lübeck itself was breathing, and the lanterns, her lanterns, were the rhythm by which it dreamed. By late summer's end, the winds carried something new, not cold, not storm, but reminder, a breath of autumn waiting just beyond the tree ears, rustling in the ash leaves and whispering through the churchyard gate. Alina felt it, not as worry, but as a soft invitation, a reminder that the light she carried would soon mean even more. The days would shorten, the nights would deepen, and her lanterns, her quiet, watchful lanterns, would become the threads that stitched evening to dawn. One dusk she noticed a pattern. More people were lighting candles indoors before her lanterns flared to life, as if they remembered, as if her nightly flame had rekindled something in their memory. The old ways, when light was shared from house to house, from street to street, not with switches, but with care. It was the way of the town before clocks ruled the hours, when a nightlighter's steps marked the time more surely than bells. Her footsteps, her rhythm, was now the heartbeat of twilight, and somehow she could feel that, not as weight, but as belonging. That evening the fog rolled in thicker than usual. The Baltic air crept between rooftops and curled around chimney stones. But the lanterns, they held. Their glow shimmered golden in the mist, casting halos in every direction. It felt like walking through stars, as if the heavens had drifted down and scattered their light along the wall. And there, in that softened silence, Alina felt completely within the light, not outside it, not beside it, but part of it, a keeper, a vessel, a flickering heart in a sea of glow, to reach the final lantern with the cat at her heels. It waited, as usual, Perched near the edge of the parapet, eyes gleaming like tiny moons, Alina bent to light the flame, and as she rose, the wind shifted, carrying with it a sound. A song, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Voices from below, children again, singing the rhyme she had heard before. Lantern burn and lantern stay, show the dreams that hide away. Their voices drifted upward, carried on air thick with salt and memory. Alina didn't speak. She only stood there, hands at her sides, heart still. Because she understood now, more than ever. This wasn't just a task, not just routine. It was a shared dream. A nightly weaving of unseen threads. Her light, their hope, the sky above, the earth below. She lingered longer that night. Not to work, not to walk, but to be still. To listen, to feel. And when she returned home, she didn't light the hearth. She let the lanterns outside glow through her window, filling the room with their soft gold. And in that quiet she whispered aloud, "To every light that came before mine, thank you." Then she closed her eyes and let the glow carry her into sleep. The first leaves fell quietly, one, then another, drifting like old parchment caught in the wind. Alina noticed them clinging to the cracks in the stone, burnished amber, soft brown, curls of gold against grey. The lantern light made them glow, as if even the fallen things were gently honoured. She bent once to pick one up, a small heart-shaped elm leaf. Its edge curled just enough to catch a drop of dew. She pressed it into her pouch, not for keeping, just for carrying, because some things need only be held for a little while. The evenings came earlier now. By the time she reached the tower path, the last bit of light had already slipped behind the rooftops. Children's games ended sooner, shutters closed more quickly, and the streets below quieted with a kind of cosy stillness. The town was preparing for the darker season, the time when light would mean even more. She could feel the quiet anticipation in the way her flames were watched, not out of curiosity, but trust. The people were beginning to lean on the lanterns like steady stones, not because they couldn't see without them, but because they didn't want to. One window in particular began to glow just as she passed, an old one, 3rd floor near the spice alley. Each evening, as she struck her flint, a small candle appeared behind the glass. Always the same, tiny, golden, flickering gently behind sheer cloth. She never saw who lived there, never heard a voice, never caught a face, but the candle was faithful, and it began to feel like a companion flame, a quiet hello from behind the pane. She called it the mirror light in her mind, and she greeted it with a tilt of her head each time she passed, because sometimes the smallest lights carry the biggest meaning. She remembered something her grandmother had said long ago, when Alina was barely taller than a milk pail. In the old days, people lit their door lanterns not to chase away darkness, but to welcome home whatever wandered. She hadn't understood it then, but now she lit her lanterns with that same thought. Not to fight the night, not to banish it, but to say, "You're welcome here, even in shadow, even in silence, even in the hush between dreams. You are welcome." One night, a light rain began as she walked the southern edge. Not storm, not cold, just a soft whisper against the stone and ivy. She didn't hurry. Her cloak gathered the droplets like memory. The flame hissed once in her glass lantern, then settled. The cat followed her, as always, its fur damp and glistening, and the world blurred slightly, the mist and the rain and the gold light melting together, like a painting still drying on canvas. She paused beneath the eaves near the weaver's tower, looked out across the rooftops. The rain fell softly, and the lanterns held, each one a tiny beacon, each one a steady breath. That night, in her room, Alina opened the little wooden box again, the one with her grandfather's lantern. She didn't light it, just held it in her lap as the storm tapped gently at the panes. She thought of all the hands that had held it before hers, all the streets it had lit, all the darkness it had softened. She traced the edge with her thumb, then whispered, "You still burn, even when the flame is resting." And then she placed it gently back inside, the lid closed with a soft click, like the end of a lullaby verse. The rains grew longer, not harsh, not heavy, but soft and lasting, like the town itself was being gently washed, stone by stone, window by window. And still, Alina walked. Each night her lanterns bloomed through the mist, gold against grey, their flame steady despite the droplets. She had learned over time how to walk with water, how to shield the flint just enough, how to angle the glass so the flame caught, even as the wind circled around her. These were not things she'd been taught in words, but in repetition, in rhythm, in the faithful art of doing. She began to notice new things along the wall, not grand, not loud, just quiet signs that the city saw her. A child's sketch pinned under a cobblestone, a drawing of a girl with a glowing staff, a tiny string of blue beads tied around a lantern base, a scrap of parchment folded into a paper boat, sitting beside the Westgate post. When she unfolded it, the message read, "I fell asleep waiting for your light. I dreamed I was floating." She tucked the note gently into her pouch, and that night she lit every lantern just a little slower. Not because she was tired, but because each flame now felt like a reply. In her quiet moments, she sometimes wondered what her life might have been if she'd never answered that first call, never stepped into the evening with a satchel of oil and a head full of stories. Would she still find this same peace, this same hush between each breath? Perhaps, but the lanterns had become her second skin, not a burden, not a role, but a way of being, like a melody she knew by heart, like a path that appeared beneath her feet only after she took the first step. She asked her grandmother one night, softly by the hearth, "Did you ever carry light?" Her grandmother looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "No, little star, but I baked bread for those who did. I stitched their satchels. I swept their steps." Alina felt something bloom inside her, because light isn't only carried by those who hold the flame, it's also made by those who care for the carrier. And in that moment, she realized her place in a much larger story. A lineage of quiet hands, of warmth passed down, of watchfulness shared. One evening near harvest, the air shifted. Cooler now, crisper. The kind of breeze that lifts your hair and reminds you, change is near. Alina lit the northernmost lantern first, its flame curling brightly in the gathering dusk. And as she turned to walk toward the next post, she heard music. Not close, not loud, but drifting. A fiddle, soft and slow. A voice humming a lullaby without words. She didn't stop, didn't seek it out, just walked with the music, as if it had always been part of her route. Because the lanterns didn't ask for silence, they asked for presence, and in that moment, the music became part of the light. When she reached the final lantern, she lingered. The mist had begun to rise, catching the light in scattered ribbons. She breathed in deeply, and the air smelled of something earthy. Damp bark, turning leaves, warm stone. She closed her eyes and stood there, bathed in gold, wrapped in quiet. A girl and her lantern, a city in its night, and above her, the stars returning once more, one by one. The first frost came quietly, not in fanfare, not in a storm, just a single morning, when the rooftops wore a shimmer of white and every blade of grass held a crystal breath. Alina had noticed it the night before, how the wind had grown more careful, how the stars had appeared sharper in the cold-washed sky. Even the lanterns had burned with a cleaner flame, as if the chill had purified the oil somehow. The warmth of their glow stood in perfect contrast to the crispness all around. She wrapped herself more carefully that evening, thicker cloak, woolen gloves, a knitted scarf from her grandmother tucked close around her neck. And still, the cold kissed her cheeks as she walked. But she welcomed it. It made the flame more meaningful. It reminded her that what she carried was not just light, but warmth. The cat began walking closer now, no longer just a shadow at her heels. Sometimes it would dart ahead to the next lantern as if to prepare it for her. Other times it paused beside her and let its soft body press briefly against her boot before continuing on. She named it silently. Soot, a fitting name for a creature born of chimney ash and midnight. And Soot never objected, not that Alina expected it to. It was a companion of quiet understandings. That night, something unexpected happened. As she passed the mill lane, she heard the soft creak of a window above. A voice, old and careful, called out, "You light it just the same way my father did." Alina looked up. A small face peered down, wrinkled, kind-eyed, wrapped in a shawl. Alina smiled and bowed her head. The voice continued. "He walked this wall in 1891. Said the lanterns always listened, if you spoke to them kindly." Alina touched the glass of the lantern and whispered, "Still true?" The window closed with a soft thud. and the moment passed like fog over stone, but the warmth of it lingered long after the flame had been lit. She reached the south wall just as the moon rose, a pale disk, low and yellow, floating above the harbour, like a watchful eye. Its reflection shimmered in puddles along the cobbled way, and as she paused to light the flame, she caught her own reflection in the lantern's glass. A girl in a thick cloak, face framed by steam and golden glow, but more than a girl, a rhythm, a presence, a keeper of flame. Sometimes she wondered, when she was gone someday, years from now, many years, would someone remember her? Not her name, perhaps not even her face, but her light, the way the lanterns burned in rhythm, the hush they brought, the stories they quietly held. She hoped so, because the lanterns weren't hers to begin with. They belonged to all who needed them, all who walked beneath their glow, and all she ever wanted was to leave them burning just a little brighter. That night, when she returned home, she found something on the doorstep, a loaf of sweet bread wrapped in cloth, and a note, "For the light bringer, you make the night feel gentle." She stood there a moment, heart hushed, then opened the door, carried the gift inside, and placed it on the kitchen table with both hands, as if handling something sacred. And in a way, she was, because kindness, when wrapped in cloth and left in the dark, is its own kind of lantern. The wind sang lower now, not whistling, not rushing, just singing, a long, hushed tune that threaded through the chimneys and whispered against the shutters as if the city itself were humming. Alina listened as she walked. She had come to know the wall not just with her eyes, but with her ears. Every sound told her something. The tap of her boots on a frost-hardened stone, the soft tick of flint against steel, the sigh of each lantern as it came to life. All of it. Music. Not composed, not rehearsed, but known. A lullaby between flame and fog. One evening, as the first snow flurried down, Alina found something new near the cathedral gate. Tucked into the base of the lantern post and a bundle of dried rosemary and a carved wooden token. No note this time, no signature, just a symbol etched into the wood, a circle of light with 3 radiating lines. She didn't know what it meant, but she tucked it into her pouch, held it gently, and whispered, "Thank you, whoever you are." Because this too was light, not firelight, but recognition. The snow deepened, and the path grew slower, but she welcomed it. The sound of snow underfoot, that soft crunch like paper folding, was a rhythm all its own. Soot followed behind, his paw prints making little commas in the snow, trailing after her like gentle punctuation. And the lanterns, oh, how they glowed. Their warmth looked even warmer against the silver white. Little suns set into the hush. She felt like she was walking through a snow globe, held inside something delicate, protected by the quiet. One night she passed a small child and her mother watching from a window. The child's hand pressed to the glass. Her breath made little clouds as she whispered something, a rhyme perhaps, or a wish. Alina smiled and lifted her hand just slightly. Not a wave, not quite, just a shared moment. A connection. The child beamed, and the mother bowed her head, and Alina kept walking, heart warmed in the deepest part, because this was why. Sometimes she spoke to the lanterns now, not always with words, but in thought. You've burned longer than me, seen more seasons, heard more prayers. She hoped they remembered it all, the fogs and the festivals, the lonely walkers and the laughing ones. The times they burned through storms and the nights they flickered in stillness. They were witnesses, carriers of unseen hours, and now they carried her too. One evening she paused at the central lantern, held her flint a moment longer before sparking the flame. She closed her eyes and asked softly, "Do you remember the first time I lit you?" A pause, only silence, and then a flame, bright, steady, warm, and somehow it felt like a yes. As she walked back home, the snow thickened, but the city glowed behind her. Lanterns on the wall, candles in windows, hearthlight behind heavy doors. It was a tapestry now. She had stitched each thread with steady hands and whispered flame, and the pattern was clear. Light begets light. Always. The snow kept falling. Night after night it softened the city, blanketing rooftops, rounding the edges of chimneys, catching in every crevice of the old stone wall. It made everything quieter, as though the world had pulled a thick wool blanket over itself and settled into sleep. Even Alina's footsteps felt hushed. Even her breath rose slower. But the lanterns, they burned on, each one a golden ember in the white hush of winter. She moved more slowly now, not from weariness, but from reverence. There was something sacred in the deep stillness, something holy in how the light touched the snow and turned it to honey. Sometimes she paused, not to rest, but simply to see, to look out across the city and marvel at what flame could do when met with care. The people began placing things by the lanterns, little tokens left in the snow, a ribbon of red wool, a wooden heart, cinnamon stick tied with twine. None of them bore names, none of them asked for thanks. But Alina gathered them all, tucking them gently into her satchel, then placing them by her hearth at home. Her mantle soon held a collection of quiet kindnesses, each one a reminder that she was not alone in her light-keeping. One night, near the chapel spire, she found something unexpected, a second lantern, new, polished, unlit. It stood beside hers, a note tucked beneath it in careful script, for the next pair of hands, let the light never falter. Alina stood still for a long while. The wind moved past her like a sigh. She reached out, and with a slow breath, lit the second lantern. Its glow joined hers, not brighter, not louder, just together. Side by side, they burned in the winter dark, and something in her heart turned soft. Later that night, when she returned home, she opened her grandfather's lantern one last time. She polished the glass, oiled the wick, and then she lit it. Just once. Its flame was gentler than she remembered, wiser somehow. It glowed with the light of every hand that had ever carried it. And as it burned beside her on the table, she sat in silence and listened to everything it had seen. She dreamed that night of all the lanterns she had ever lit. One by one they rose into the sky like floating stars, and beneath them the wall disappeared. The streets vanished, and only light remained, carried, remembered, given. And then the final winter evening came. It was not marked with fanfare, no celebration or trumpets call, just snow falling lightly against a quiet city. The harbour was still, the rooftops soft and white, the windows glowing. Alina stood in her doorway, bundle in hand, lanterns carefully packed. Her fingers lingered a moment on the wooden latch. She closed the door slowly behind her. One last time. She made her way up the wall, boots crunching softly over frostbitten stone. Soot followed, as always, though even he seemed quieter now, more aware of the moment. There was no wind, only the hush of winter holding its breath. The city below dozed beneath wool and light, and Alina. She walked her path as if it were part of her body. A final rhythm, a final song, each lantern lit with care, the same way as always. But tonight her hand lingered longer on the flame. As she reached the central tower, she paused. In the distance, a small group of children stood in the snow. Each one held a little candle cupped in their mittened hands, their faces turned up to watch her, not speaking, not calling, just present. And Alina, heart full, lifted her final lantern, lit it slowly, softly. The flame danced behind the glass, casting gold across her face, and down below, one by one. The children lit their candles. Their tiny flames shimmered in the dark like echoes of her own. She made her way down the far end of the wall. The last stretch. The final lantern waited. Soot leapt up beside her, curling his tail around the base. Alina drew a deep breath, the kind that reaches all the way into your ribs, and she lit the last flame. The lantern glowed, quiet, faithful, home. Then, with slow hands, she reached into her pouch and drew out her grandfather's lantern. She hung it beside the new one, the gifted lantern, left for the next flame-bearer. Old and new, memory and future, side by side. She stepped back, regarding them in silence, then whispered, "I've carried you well." And the wind, soft and low, seemed to reply, "Yes, you have." The next morning, a girl barely older than 12 climbed the tower stairs. She wore a blue scarf, hands trembling just slightly as she reached the top, but she found the flame already waiting. 2 lanterns burning, one warm with new oil, the other older, its brass frame polished by many winters. She looked out across the city, and somewhere in the fog, a cat's tail disappeared over a rooftop. The girl smiled, lit her first lantern, took her first step, and the light continued. So if, one evening, you find yourself walking an old stone path where the mist curls soft and the rooftops lean in, and you see a golden glow spaced just so along a distant wall, remember, a girl once walked there, a lantern in hand, a quiet promise in her heart, and now that promise is still kept. Every flame you pass, every hush between them, is the echo of her story, carried in warmth, passed in silence, night after night after night. Now, dear listener, let your own eyes grow heavy. Let the glow of Alina's lanterns guide you inward. Feel the hush of snowfall, the softness of wool, the flicker of golden flame at the edge of your dreams. You have walked the wall with her. Now, rest. The lights will stay lit. Even as you sleep, even as you drift, you are safe, you are warm, you are carried. Good night, and may your dreams be quiet and full of light.